Good morning. Welcome to the Parks, Arts, Education, and Equality Subcommittee. Today is May 24th, 2017, and I will be calling this meeting to order. I'm Vice Mayor Laura Pastor, and I have Councilman now Kowski and Councilman DeCiccio. I have no cards for call to the public. I will be moving to the consent items. There is a card on item number 2. And then we'll vote on, or moving the consent items. Tim?
Good morning. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Tim Surakowski. I love the idea of Hance Park, but I just have a couple questions on, first of all, they're going to spend all this money on Hance Park. Do we even know how many people are using the park? I mean, we need some solid numbers at this point, and we have no solid numbers. Secondly, since pretty much a lot of the parks are in disarray, are we going to spend all this other money doing another new park or doing a new renovation of a park when all the other parks need this money more so than spending, what, $135 million in a park that we're not even sure is going to be used? So I just have questions here about usage, number of people coming and really using the park. I haven't seen any hard numbers yet, and exactly how much money it's going to cost for all of this, because taking $15 million out of 3PI money to do the initial plan, I think is a waste of money of 3PI. Truly is a waste of money. That $15 million can be used in some of the other parks at the present time to really make our park system nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have, I'm assuming it would be Inger to come speak about the question since it's an item.
Vice Mayor Pastor, members of the subcommittee. Hance Park is heavily used for special events. It's heavily used on the weekends. That dog park is one of our most used dog parks in our system. What we're hoping to do is have the seed money to work with the Phoenix Community Alliance and the Hance Park Conservancy for them to go out and raise additional money to put into the park. So we have worked with those two groups to assemble a plan as soon as we get approval to go forward and then seek sponsorships, donations, things of that nature to make this vision a dream to come true. So Kenny Knutson is the city engineer. This particular process went through the streets department. So if there's questions about the process, Kenny can answer those. But as far as the use of the park is heavily used. More activity helps us take away some of those negative elements that currently are part of the park and we need to address as well. But activity always does make a park something that then is good for the community. We have lots of apartments going up. This park is something that would address the needs of those folks who won't have green space in their own living situation. So I do believe that we can meet with Tim Surakowski and talk to him about what we already see in the park, if that's something that would help him as well.
Go ahead.
And just a comment, I represent that area and I also represent parts of downtown. Ever since we lost Patriot Square, that used to be our town square, then we moved it down to Cityscape. Now we're talking about the light rail going down Central all the way down to South Phoenix to Baseline. So now it's going to go right in the middle of Cityscape. So that has become sort of like our town square where we have ice skating, we have concerts and events. So having a light rail right down the middle of Cityscape is going to interrupt all that. Block 23, where the new Fry's and all the construction's going on now, where we used to have the big events like the Super Bowl and all that, that's no longer available neither. So now we're really looking at Margaret Hance Park as a park where it's not just a park where you can go and have your kids play on the playground and all that, or a dog park, but it's really bigger than that. It's sort of our central park of Phoenix, where we're going to have all kinds of activities. So it seems like the activities are moving from the downtown area because the space are limited, and it's moving more that way. We have the library also, where there's a lot of projects that happen in the library, but then they take the kids out to the park to have activities. We're looking at a skate park out there also. So all those things, all those amenities are going to bring in more people. So I think it's a great idea to really look at in the future to how do we handle all this. We're looking at an amphitheater that can handle concerts, operas, and all kinds of cultural diversity events out there also. So that's just to tell you that it's much bigger than just a park.
Well, if I could ask a question though too, I mean, the whole idea behind, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, the whole idea behind the design gets to where it'll determine what your expenses are going to be. So that way, if you look at your design and your plan of what it is you're going to get accomplished, that's how you'll end up coming up with what the true cost of the park is going to end up being. And then you can make determinations of whether or not you want certain functions in there or not.
Great, then have general funds pay the $15 million and not have it come out of 3PI. Because you're banging 3PI. 3PI pays for everything else that's repairs in the park. Your general funds pay nothing. 3PI pays for it all.
Would you please respond?
Vice Mayor Pastor and members of the subcommittee, the Parks Preserve Initiative Fund is meant to improve parks, to replace playgrounds if they need it. So this does fit within what 3PI is intended for. And again, we feel from the Parks and Recreation perspective, with all the community input that we have had, this is something that's critical to the vitality of the downtown area.
So what I am hearing is that you are acting, or it's in the preview of the 3PI to be able to bring enhancements to Margaret Hance Park. It's also community has given a voice to wanting to activate this space. Us knowing through the planning of downtown that we have lost active space, and now we're moving all our activities towards Margaret Hance Park. Just very similar to, I think it was the Final Four concert. We are anticipating to hold more and more weekend activities at that capacity in order, and we have no space. We don't have the open space. Civic space civic space
small.
is not large enough to hold the capacity that we would like to draw downtown and activate all the, not only Margaret Hance Park, but all of the downtown area. And to
Vice
be
Mayor
able to
Pastor.
move people and really have, be able to move everybody in and out of our Margaret Hance Park, but also the connectivity of the light rail and just bringing people down to our city.
Yeah, Vice Mayor Pastor, members of the subcommittee, it is really an essential component to the downtown living and the importance of having open space available for the community.
Okay,
Can I have one more thing too?
go ahead.
Now, these monies are going into capital expenditures, right? Which when the soft costs of your designs, but then the rest of it would go into capital expenditures. We're not using any of this for operational.
Vice Mayor Pastor and members of the subcommittee, that is correct. This is not for operation. This is to get the vision and the park built and to leverage our opportunity, our funding to get other people to put their investments into it as well.
And I can see their concern though too because of what happened with the golf course fund. Okay, that was an operational expense. And my understanding with PPI, 3PI, that was supposed to be for capital expenditures and then that was going to be supplemented with the operational end from the general fund. So that those monies would always go into some sort of capital expenditure. Whether it's a park playground or a park design or even the expansion of the park system itself.
Vice Mayor Pastor and Councilman DeCiccio, the new language actually allows for maintenance and operation. So it is an appropriate use, even if it was operation and maintenance.
When did that happen?
In the 2008 election.
Okay, well, that's too bad. I don't think it should have done that. I didn't realize that it happened in the 2008 election. And that's the problem. That is a problem. And we could end up working on a policy here though too, because you've got to be able to use those monies from what I understand and why the public supported it. I was here when that went through, was that this was going to be for capital expenditures and then the general fund would be able to supplant any, but that's another discussion outside of this.
Just one point, Vice Mayor and Councilman DeCiccio and members of the subcommittee. Rangers are specifically called out, and so rangers are operation as well. But rangers are specifically called out in the 3PI language for both
Okay.
flatland parks and mountain parks.
Okay. No, thank you.
All right, thank you. So these are, item 2 and 3 are consent actions. Is somebody willing to do a motion?
I make a motion to approve consent items number 2 and 3.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I need to go back because I was rushing. I need to go back to the minutes of the meeting. April 26th, can somebody
I'd like
make a
to make a
motion?
motion to approve the minutes of April 26th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. We are at information only, 4 and 5. Does anybody want to have a discussion? Okay,
Motion to, do we have to approve it? No, it's just information, right?
it's information only. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move item 8 and 9 up. The reason why I'm moving 8 and 9 up is I have to be somewhere at 10:30, and I want to have this discussion, just in case if we start to lose time. I will ask item 6 and 7, and item 9 and 10, no, item 10 to be then for June, if we run out of time. So, I think I'm gonna combine the discussion 8 and 9 together, because I don't think we can have a discussion without 8 and 9. So,
Vice Mayor Pastor and members of the subcommittee, today I'm here to talk to you about the Parkland sale policy. I'll take 9 first, which is the revision of the Parkland sale. So the Parks and Recreation Board in 2011 found themselves in a situation without a policy, without a process to dispose or transfer or sell land. So over the course of the 2 years leading up to April 2013, the Parks Board asked for a policy to be created that would help us involve the community in the disposition of parkland. So we created a 9-step process with multiple opportunities for public input. It took 12 to 18 months if the process went on schedule. And so we've been hearing from not only the subcommittee, but also from the Parks and Recreation Board and the community that it takes too long then to sell parkland. So we were tasked with revising the policy to reduce the amount of time that it takes in the process, but to also maintain the integrity of the public input and the community dialogue. And that was critical and important to every body that sees this policy. We also heard from the community that they want to make sure that we added the language that said, that it's the last option. If there's no other way to manage with the property, all options for recreational use are used first before the land goes for sale. And so that language was added as well. So the new policy was approved in April on the 27th. The 9 steps have been reduced to 5, and basically what it does is it combines some of the timing so that it doesn't have to, 1 month, you have to wait for the next month. You can do some things concurrently, but it doesn't reduce the amount of public input. The amount of public input is still there. So we can reduce the amount of time for that review from 18 months to between 6 and 8 months, depending on how we can get on agendas and calendars and things of that nature. The committee of citizens who helped us create this policy came to the meeting, and they were satisfied with what the solution was that we came up with, as was the Parks Board by approving it. So we maintained the public input, and we are currently now at a policy that has only 5 steps versus 9 and can reduce the time by about 10 months. So that's the information about the new policy. And if you want, I can go right into the next piece, or we can ask questions about that.
Does anybody have any questions about the policy?
I do. Especially out in the Levine area, I know we used a lot of impact fees and all that to purchase parks, and people are still waiting for a community center out there at Chavez's, Cesar Chavez Park. I'm just concerned that all this property that is being sold in the Levine area will be going, in the future, might be going to the golf fund. My thing is that people were buying properties and investing in homes thinking that there is going to be some type of a park or some type of activities that their children can be a part of. So I just want to make sure that if it's within that zip code area or within that district or whatever you want to call it, that funds stay within that area for parks programs. I always thought that's what it was in the past, right?
So just a real quick question on that. Vice Mayor Pastor, members of the subcommittee, impact fee have restrictions, so those can't be put in other places. So, and I'll talk about that in just a second as well.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm gonna blend, because I have cards on 8 and 9. And my question to Thomas is, would you like to stop and have me do the public comments, or let's just listen to the whole presentation of 8 and 9, and then we can come back?
I think 8 and 9 together.
Okay, all right.
Could-
I just want to make sure. Yes.
Madam Chair, I wonder if I could follow up on that too. Some of those parklands, even whether it's Levine or even parts of my district, were always, there was a significant amount of money that were impact fees that were put in there. If a sale, it does occur, I mean, and there was a court ruling, and we got attorneys here too, back in the 90s. It's the Nolan case dealing with the Nexus. If you took impact fees, it had to stay in a certain region anyways, legally. So now, I don't know if you end up selling that, if those monies still have to stay in that same area or not. It just seems logical that if there were any impact fees at all used on any project, you should keep that in the same area because they were taken from that area.
Vice Mayor Pastor and members of the subcommittee, that is correct. Impact fees have to stay where they were retained from.
So if you sell that land, then those dollars would stay in that same area, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, that's important. And I think the other thing that I think the councilman was bringing up, and I find it interesting, it's a good discussion, I like it, is that if a park is sold where citizens were promised a park or an open space or something there, they should be getting something in return. So if they were told that there was going to be an open space park and we had land there that was available that we ended up selling, those monies should highest priority. I don't know if you always want to say they're dedicated to one area or not. I'll leave that up to the councilman, but those monies should always stay in that same area because that's where the commitment was made. It's just something, at least at the highest, higher priority. Just something to think about. That's interesting, though.
We'll be speaking about item 8 now. I think item 9 has to do with the fact that the policy has been changed from 18 months to possibly, at the max, 8 months. And that when a park property is ready to be vetted, it will go through this new process.
That's correct.
Okay. And then item 8, we'll be talking about policy regarding the proceeds of Parkland Sale and general fund payment plan to 3PI.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yes, so in 2013, the mayor and city council approved a plan to address the golf deficit, the golf fund deficit. And so dating back to 1988, the golf courses were generating a deficit. The finance department carried it as an accounts receivable, and so we had to clear that up in order to keep the credit rating in a positive light, and we wanted to make sure we did that. Golf has always been a part of the Parks and Recreation Department. It's always been part of our portfolio. It is an activity that is recreational in nature, just like softball, swimming, and soccer. In 2013, the first transfer happened right after the approval. It was $5.7 million, and you can see the rest that add up to $15 million and some change there. And so it was in three installments. It was a sound legal decision. The funds were used to maintain and preserve open space, and it was opined by our law department. So what we have in front of you today is some options to return funds to Parks Preserve Initiative Fund. The first option would be to make a payment from the general fund. If we did something like this, other programs would either have to be reduced or cut. So that one is kind of self-defeating. The second one is not really a likely solution. It's using the positive cash flow from the Golf Fund. Right now, we're on pace this year to break even. Last year, we were real close, but we're on pace. If things stay at the rate that they are now, we'll break even. But in the long term, it's going to take a really long time to get there because we still have improvements to do in the parks facility, in the golf facilities, like irrigation, things like that. Use a one-time payment from eligible city land sales. This would limit the city's flexibility to use for other budget needs that they might have, and would include other resources. And fourth would be a one-time cash option to use eligible proceeds from the park land sales, and this would be an appropriate use because it is within the Parks and Recreation system. So the current parkland sale opportunities that we have right now, Rose Mofford Sports Complex, and that's on the bottom left. That is an area right on Peoria and 23rd Avenue that has been a vacant lot for a pretty long time. We've developed the sports complex with 3 soccer fields, and we've got already 6 softball fields. We've got basketball and all sorts of things that are sports related. So we've built out what we feel we need to do at that facility. So this would be a parcel that we could sell, and is right now in the process. And then also Cuban Park. We've developed that park, and there's a little parcel that's right next to the wellness center of the school district, and they need additional parking. And the benefit to us there in both cases actually is we would benefit from shared parking for the park right next to it. It would also, the Cuban Park from Buckeye would give you an access point which currently does not have that access point. So both of these would be not only beneficial to the existing park because of additional parking, but would be beneficial to the park system in general. So these are ready to be posted in June, and we would come back to council after the summer break. So currently, those are the 2 the park lands that we do have available to sell. We're well down the process of public input, and all the public input that we received was not opposed to these 2 properties being sold, and that's where we currently are for the parkland sale. Go back.
I have public comment. Do you want to do public comment first, or would you like?
You're the chair. You tell me what to do.
Okay, well then I can tell him, hey, you heard that here.
Hey.
I can tell him what to do, all right?
People don't realize she always tells me what to do. And
all right.
And what do? I always do it.
I have Tim.
We're gonna let Tom go first, please.
Okay. So, Tom, I have 6 minutes that have been dedicated to you. Okay.
Thank you for your time. My name is Tom Stoops. I live at 12435 South 47th Avenue. I'm right up against the South Mountain Park and have been there for 30 years. And so I'm very interested in the park system. I've also a real estate attorney, and I've been hired by this group that you have been harassed by for so long to monitor and discuss the issue of payback of the $15 million. And I'm delighted that there's a plan forming, but I have a few questions. One is that I understand that there's been an appraisal done on the property that's to be sold, and I don't know if that's been made public or if it can be made public, but I'd very much like to know the value of the land, if it goes through, and if it's sold, how much of the $15 million would we anticipate that would pay back?
Vice Mayor Pastor and members of the subcommittee, we have been advised that as part of the RFP process, it is not appropriate to release the information right now until after the process is in place. So that's our real estate group, and I think we have somebody here from real estate. Denise Olson, are you here? And yep, and Law's here as well. So we have been advised. We've been advised that information should not be made public at this time. So the question is about. Excuse me.
How big is the property?
A little over 5 acres.
Oh, 5 acres.
So it sounds like we're unable to disclose that until after the RFP. But continue.
Well, and I guess that brings me to the next point is, again, I'm a real estate lawyer, so I deal with this all the time. Most properties, almost all properties privately sold are sold through a brokerage. And I know there are two choices. You could do either one, and you've chosen the RFP. Could we figure out the rationale for that? Because ordinarily, a commercial property would not be sold in a request for bid status. There would be an elaborate marketing, and I don't know of a single circumstance in which the private person would simply try and put it out for bids, except in a mortgage foreclosure, and that's a forced sale, and nobody ever gets the full amount of the money. So I know it's been chosen. I guess I'm trying to figure out why that particular option, since you could sell it through a brokerage, was chosen.
Vice Mayor Pastor and members of the subcommittee, the RFP allows us to have shared parking, and when we talked it over, we did talk about which way would we want to go, but the RFP would allow for the requirement to have shared parking when they're not using their building or they're not using their property, for us to use it as overflow parking for the sports complex and also for the park in Cuban's situation. So that's why we chose to go the RFP route in these two cases.
I would point out that that's a restriction that could also be put on the sale of the property. You can put deed restrictions. You can make all kinds of different easements, cross easements, and a lot of other things that you can do. You can market it through a broker. I'm not saying that that's the best way to do it, but it's certainly the commercial way to do it. And if there's a need to retain some property rights, you can put it in the deed. And everything that she just described can also be done through a brokerage. And I guess the other thing is there a plan, and since we don't know how much this property is going to sell for, is there a plan for what to do once this property sells? And let's just make up some numbers. Let's say that it sells for $1 million. It could sell for $5 or it could sell for $100,000. You can't share the number with me, so I understand that. Is there a plan to dedicate maybe the next sale that goes through the same process for the repayment of the $15 million? Or is this all there is?
Those are the four options that we will be deciding today. And that's what we're discussing right now. And so at the end of this discussion, we will have a dialogue and figure out which one of those four options or a combo of the four options. I don't know. But that's the dialogue that we're having in order to return funds to the 3PI.
And one last question. Under these circumstances, do we have any estimate of the time frame for the sale of the two parcels that are in question right now?
Vice Mayor Pastor and members of the subcommittee, we intend to have this RFP out in June, and because of summer break, we plan to be back in October with a proposal to the full council.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have,
Could I ask her some questions on that?
sure, I was just going to finish up our public comment. So, see, he let me lead. Tim?
Tim Surakowski. I have a couple of questions also, and the first question being, after these first two pieces of property are sold, then what? How's the rest of the money going to be paid back? I looked at number 3 and I looked at number 4, and I have some serious questions on the language of number 4. I did not understand that. I did not understand number 4. And maybe, since you have the legal department here, you can have them explain into the totality of number 4, because I'm a little concerned that if I can't understand it, the average layperson could not understand the payback agreement. Is this a one-time scenario? And how are we going to pay back the rest of the money? For example, if this property is only worth $2 million, where's the other $13 million going to come from? If you're telling me that some of this other property was funded in different manners and has to stay into this location, then my next question is, how are you going to pay back the money if it has to stay in this location? what are all these other things that we do not know at the present time that we should know, especially about all these different property scenarios. So I guess we need to really look at this and say, here, this is what we would like to do, but we need more answers. And I think we need to sit down and hammer out all these different problems before we even do I hate to say it, a vote on one of these options, because these options aren't very clear. Because we don't have a beginning and we don't have an end. We just have, here, this is what we're thinking about doing, but we need to sit down and really say, this is the plan, this is how we're going to handle it, and this is what we're going to do for the next number of years. Since Greta is sick, she asked me to voice a couple things for herself. She wants a time limit on this particular scenario, and I believe there should be a time limit. This is not going to become something that's for the next 20 years. You're going to pay back here, you're going to pay back here, you're going to pay back here. I don't think that's going to resolve the scenario. I think we need a firm beginning and end date. I think we need a relationship, a contractual relationship, that this is how we're going to do it and this is how it's going to be. She also wanted to reiterate, because after speaking with her this morning, she couldn't talk. She goes, please, everyone, reread the initiative and reread what it said, because the parks at the present time need this money, because the only thing that's really running the parks to do repairs in the parks is 3PI money. And most people don't realize general fund's not paying for anything anymore. They're not paying for any money to do any repairs at all on the park system. General funds, I want to repeat this, general funds pays nothing for any of the repairs of any of the parks. 3PI money does. So if general fund is not going to be used at this point, or no money from general fund, then we need to start looking at 3PI and how it's being used correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry?
Hi, Jerry Vang. Thank you, Chair Pastor and subcommittee members. I like to reference this as the new era. The last time Tom was here was 2 years ago, almost to the day. And we were talking about Rangers then, 3PI money. We had just prevailed in a public records suit. And so we're here. It took a while to get to this point, but I want to compliment Inger and her staff for all that they've done in these 2 years. And I know it was referenced, three of us. Believe me, there are people watching right now on Channel 11 that YouTube this meeting when they can, rangers, other employees in the city park system, and the public, the people that voted on 3PI, and which back in 2008 came through this very subcommittee to the council and then out to the public, and it won with more votes than Mayor Gordon did that year. So there's the preference of the people here in the valley. The parks are eminently important to them. We look forward to working in good faith to get this money paid back, because the infusion into it. Right now, we're on the brink of 10 days from now starting the two biggest projects ever in this park system history, the renovation of South Mountain and Piestewa Peak. Going to be roughly $40 million in the next few years. And, and I hear from public lands people around the country, they call our mountain park system, within the Phoenix City boundaries, an urban national park. And that's basically what we have. You just look at the numbers. So I think we need to move this forward. And we can hash out all the stuff. Lord knows it's taken us long enough to get to this point. Let's keep working together and get this done. Thank you.
So Jerry, am I hearing you say, let's keep moving forward? Okay. I just want to be clear on it. John Connelly?
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is John Connelly. I live at 1301 North Scottsdale Road in Scottsdale. I also own a house in Phoenix. I'm here actually representing Operation Saving Papago, where concrete was poured in Papago Park. However, I would like to bring up the subject of this matter as well, because it really is rather interesting to me that you have funds that are owed to this 3PI, and yet there was almost $300,000 spent on this concrete that was installed in Papago Park, and I'm wondering how that happened. How is it that there's $15 million that's owed by the Parks Department, and $300,000 was spent without any public input on a path in Papago Park where they put in over 1,100 square feet
If you're
of,
going to be speaking about Papago Park,
yeah.
then you need to write out a public comment. If we're speaking about 3PI,
Yeah.
and so.
Well, again, I think it relates to, no, but I think I think it relates really to 3PI in that, where is it that the funds were, why is it that they don't have funds to pay this back, but they have funds to spend on some of these other projects? That's the question that I have,
Okay.
and I'd like to have answered. Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Vice Mayor Pastor and members of the subcommittee, Papago Park had improvements allocated for Papago Park. One of the improvements was the 5K trail that the gentleman is referencing, and it came out of the money that was allocated for Papago Park improvements. We did some ramadas, we did some trail improvements, that type of thing. So it was money that was allocated for Papago Park, and it was one of the components that we used.
Out of 3PI.
Out of 3PI, that's
Okay.
correct.
All right.
Now, Ingrid, the concrete, was it used for all those different?
I think we have to probably put that,
Yeah.
I would
later.
say,
Okay.
and then on the next agenda, I would like the Papago Park item on the agenda.
Okay.
Lacey Norgard?
First of all, first name,
Okay.
last name,
Ap-
Norgard, 122 East Garfield Street in Tempe, Arizona, 85281, resident of the
Okay.
area for about 10, 15 years. Following up John Connelly, I apologize. I guess I was misinformed with how we could speak to the board. Is there a public comment period at the end?
Yes, there is.
Can I defer my time to that? I was misinformed. I thought that we had to speak on a specific item.
Well, we're speaking about 3PI.
I'll defer my statements to the
Okay.
public comment period. then.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. All righty. So we have 4 different options to look at this. And anybody have any suggestions, comments? Councilman DeCiccio.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this goes to Jerry and Tim and others that are involved with this. When the voters voted on this, they voted for the expansion of parks. I got it. That's what occurred, and it meant to be in there. And I believe it should have been in for capital. Then the 2008 came through and allowed for some of the maintenance, but I still believe it should be for capital and then supplanted with general fund monies, because that's what the public, at least I believe, believes. The other part of it is, I believe we have a fiduciary responsibility to follow through what the voters want. Whether we like it or not, or whatever our financial situation is, we have to complete that. So put those 2 on the table. I like the 3 plans. These are just in concept. We don't have specifics to each one of those yet, but I want to give you some variations maybe to look at here. And when we look at, first, let's take the one park that's 5 acres. I guess it's by Rose Marford Park. Being very direct about it. When we put in those kind of criteria, it almost tells us that we've already self-selected an entity who's going to buy it. Usually those entities then are going to offer less money. We really should open that up to, if we're going to do a sale on that, we should open that up to the general public, whether it's through a broker. I mean, that's really a good idea, or not. And then you don't have to put it up for sale at that point. You could actually lease it out to that entity for the parking. That way you got reoccurring revenue that comes in. So let's say it is $1 million. I mean, you could probably make 50, maybe, I don't think 100,000 a year at 10% of the value, but you could make a significant amount of money on a reoccurring revenue stream and still keep the asset long term if you were to do something like that, or lease out the other areas or sell off the other area other than the parking. I don't think you're going to need 5 acres of parking, but maybe you do when we have events at Rose Mofford. just something to think about. The other is the monies that were used out of this came out of the general fund, or actually went into the general fund. They really should be repaid with that, but that's just not going to happen politically here. So, you know, let's talk about what I think could be realistic that could work. So when we do talk about sales, I mean, identifying only 2 properties won't make a dent into the 15 million that's owed on that. What we ought to do, and I think I'd like to make it part of the motion here, is that any property sale from the city of Phoenix, any property sale on anything, should be used to pay this back first. It's a capital to capital expenditure, capital sale, capital, you know, to cover the capital or to cover the expenditures that came out of there. I think that that would be a logical thing. The other thing that we ought to look at is any revenue that we derive from our parks. For example, the agreement we did with Arizona State University was what, 200,000 or 300,000 a year, 200,000 per year. Those monies should be applicable to this fund until it's paid off. So those monies should be going in there. So anything that we generate from the park system itself in excess should be going there. The other thing that I think we ought to take a look at, and this is up to my colleagues too, is that when we identify these land sales that are out there, literally we should be putting out some type of schedule of when they're going to come out and what's that going to cover. That's where I would like to go with this. And then finally, you know, one of the things, Inger, you and I have talked about, there are different ways to create reoccurring revenue in some of our parks. You don't have to do an outright sale. I mean, you can literally look at this as a recurring revenue opportunity. So whether we are looking at moving out some of the golf courses out of our control because they lose money every single year, why not allow, you know, do an RFP to have someone from the private sector to take those over a period of time, whichever golf courses they are. We did that with Papago. We found a willing partner on that. But we also have the opportunity too to create, you know, reoccurring revenue on some of these parks because they're so, you know, I mean, they're good. Most of these are in pretty good locations. So where we can actually create a lease with an entity to be able to recover some of those dollars. We should be doing that anyways outside of this. So if I could make some changes to this, is that 1, we identify property, the parks property. 2, any other additional property sold from the city of Phoenix, which would be a capital, you know, sale. Those monies go directly into paying off the PPI fund. The third is to identify other properties or other parks, other ways of creating recurring revenue on some of these parks. And the fourth, I guess, would be to look at other parks that, you know, other, some of the golf course parks, some of the golf courses to move them out of the city control and put them into other people's hands where they then have to pay tax on it too. And we have a capital dollars in that. Just something to look at.
Thank you. You got all those, okay. You have any recommendations?
I have some comments. Cuban Park happens to be in my district. One of the things around Cuban Park are some mobile home and some old motels that the community's been trying to buy out because it's actually the gateway into our park. So we have probably half the park that's covered by us. The other half has a motel and other facilities. We're looking at purchasing that at one time. That was back in 2008. And because of the shortfall of funding and all that. So I was thinking that I know that the community, if we were going to sell any property, they would want us probably to try to buy that old motel. So then the park would actually go out to Buckeye Road instead of being behind this ugly motel. So I'm not sure if we've reached out to the community to even talk about the Cuban Park or just to the school itself, or how was that?
Vice Mayor Pastor and Councilman Kowski, there were community meetings. We didn't get a lot of attendance, quite honestly. And so we moved forward with the process. We did post it. We did communicate not only through the school, but through our normal processes with the radius that we're required to do. So we didn't hear that kind of feedback from them at this point.
Right. Well, I don't think I think individuals were thinking that those fundings would actually go towards buying that motel, not going towards a golf fund. and they were really excited about selling that because it would be a partnership with the school, that it would be parking both for their facility, their clinic, and also for the park. So it's going to be a dual purpose in that with the funding that we receive from the school district, that we would probably end up buying the motel and having more open space and clearing out an eyesore.
So my understanding is that there's already, we voted on for an RFP to go out, and RFP is moving.
That's correct. We have RFPs on both properties.
Yeah, they're already
going
out the door.
Okay, so I guess we need to go out there and organize the community to make sure that the funding stays
We can reach out to the
within the
community as well.
community, not going towards golf courses.
But there currently is, the RFPs are going to go out in June, so we can
Okay.
continue to work
So-
on this, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just enterprise funds, I mean, what's the definition of an enterprise fund?
So an enterprise fund is basically water, wastewater, airport. These are funds that are self-supported by their own revenue sources. Typically on enterprise funds, we've also issued some debt. So they usually have their own standalone debt.
So is the golf, I thought golf was an enterprise fund. So how's that different?
Yeah, so Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, golf used to be an enterprise fund, but because of the situation it got itself into, we decided to then make it a special revenue fund, and then it became just part of the general fund.
And when did that happen?
I don't remember the exact.
Vice Mayor Pastor and Councilman Kowski, I believe it was 2013. And then what had happened was that we were given a line item to help us close the gap. The first year it was a larger number, and this year we don't have that general fund, for lack of a better term, subsidy to help us. We have to break even this year. So it went at the same time that we were having the repayment plan. We went and took it out of the enterprise and put it into the general fund at that time. So it was the same time.
Vice Mayor? Yeah, at this time, I mean, there's so much questions to be asked. I think that I also like to look at all the possibilities of selling even some of our golf land to cover the golf fund, and looking at that in detail of which parks, which golf courses are actually making a comeback or not. So how can we actually maybe
Well,
bring that back?
actually,
and look
what's
at it?
I'm gonna recommend the staff to come back in June with a whole plan. And with all the different questions and items, and then we will have another discussion and be able then to determine out of those four what is the best option out of those four, or we may come up with a hybrid and come up with other options.
We can do
Madam
that.
Chair,
Yes.
this thing can be going on forever here. I think we have kind of a general framework. And if you don't mind, I could put a motion together and we'll see how you feel about it. And it fits with the commitment we've made to the public, and the public voted on, is that one, any sale of any park or any other property be first prioritized to pay down the PPI. That's a
Okay.
no-brainer. That's part of their proposal. And then any revenue, which is different, such as ASU and others that we derive from the parks, be used to pay down the PPI. So whether it's that agreement or others, we use that first. That's where it gets done first.
Okay.
And then third, you can come back to look at alternative ways of getting additional revenue from the parks and assessment from our golf courses, which we can discuss at a later date too. We can take that one forward.
What is your last one?
Basically to look at other, empower the Parks Department to start looking at additional revenue sources of ways of getting reoccurring income basically on some of the parks, or not, or sale, and assessment of the current golf courses, find out what it is we're doing there right now and whether or not we're losing money. Just an assessment so
Well-
we get an idea what the finances are.
I don't think that needs to be part of the
Okay.
motion. That could be part of one of the items in
Instructions.
June.
Okay, that'd be fine. So then the first two, any sale, any other properties get used first to pay down PPI, any property, whether it's, something downtown Phoenix or anywhere in the city of Phoenix, we sell a property. And then any revenues that we get from the parks, like ASU, it's used to pay down the
Very
golf, the PPI first. That's my motion.
Is there a second?
So basically, what we're looking at is just paying back 3PI first, right? And not going into, so if there's a piece of property, let's say out in Levine, as long as it's not dedicated for,
I think, okay, so I'm gonna try to answer your question.
All right, go
With
for
the
it.
knowledge that I have,
Okay.
and then see if I'm correct, and staff then could say if I'm correct or not. The knowledge that I have, if a certain parcel was purchased with, say, impact fees, there is a limit, or that property could not be, that dollar amount could not go back to 3PI because it was purchased with impact fees. So certain properties have stipulations on them in the sense of where that money goes. Is that my understanding?
Vice Mayor Pastor, members of the subcommittee, that is accurate. If there's restrictions like impact fees, for example, that would not be allowed to go back into this situation.
You could also put some language in there, this is pretty basic, that just says that if the monies are sold in one area, first priority, because PPI is going to be used in that area anyways, right? You're going to use it, that's where the first priority would go to. We could add that in there if you want to do that, if the property sale. And parks, but all other property, are you okay with us including that because otherwise we'll never get to the end game?
Vice Mayor Pastor
Fine.
and members of the subcommittee, bonds that have not been retired are also restricted, so.
Right.
Well, there will be property,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, I'm not even gonna use park property. We could have a parcel on Thomas, and there may have been purchased by the transit authority, and there are restrictions on it. It'll all depend on the restrictions, but those properties that are ready to up and go and move that have no restrictions would be the properties that would be considered to be paid back towards the 3PI.
Logical.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that. That's included in that.
Okay.
And then
So
sorry, go ahead.
can I
Madam
get
Chair.
clarity on the motion?
So, Vice Mayor Pastor, members of the subcommittee, what I have currently is any sale of park and additional city property to pay back eligible, or we'll use the word eligible, park and city property to be paid back to 3PI. Any revenue, example given, ASU, would also be returned to 3PI. Alternative ways to bring revenue streams to the Parks Department would go to 3PI, and assessing the golf, which you actually removed.
Yeah.
So it would basically be any sale of parkland, any sale of other property that is eligible, any revenue, and alternative ways to get
To look
reoccurring,
at-
get
to look at-
reoccurring income.
To look at alternative ways to get reoccurring income.
Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, could I suggest on the revenue piece that we look at that and bring that back in June as well with the other alternatives? Just because we need to do some research, what we're talking about when we say alternative revenues generated by the Parks Department.
I don't mind that part, but the sale itself,
Right.
Right.
We should
Yes.
It's 1 and 2. It's
Yeah.
really what we need to move, and then we can look at 3 and 4.
I'm fine. That's logical.
Vice Mayor Pastor and members of the subcommittee, is there an interest in putting a sunset on this, or is this a
Oh,
continued?
we need a timeline like Greta wanted. So within the next,
As far as a sunset, if,
How long would it take to pay?
It's not gonna-
how long is it gonna take to pay it? That's
well, it
the-
depends on selling land, so
Yeah.
maybe that's not maybe it's not an appropriate
Right.
thing.
Well,
Well, within the next 3 years?
I think it's
And
going
then
to be
we can
longer.
relook at it?
I just want us to be realistic so that it's
I
done
don't-
right.
I want,
Could we put a timeline of 5 years?
5 years is perfect.
Okay. It's going
Tim
to
is saying yes.
Otherwise, it's
and I
unrealistic.
gotta look at Jerry.
Yeah.
You okay?
Make it realistic.
Yeah, I just didn't. Sure, 5 years. There's a motion, a second. Is Councilman Valenzuela on the phone?
I am on the phone. I've been listening, and I'm glad you made that motion. In fact, I'll just say that I'll support it. So
Okay.
great leadership on it.
All right,
Mayor.
we're all ready to go.
Get it
All those
done.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Motion passes.
You guys okay?
I am going to continue items 6, 7, and 10 to the next meeting, because I need to get somewhere really quickly. So I'm gonna, and I'm sorry for that, because normally this does not happen, but it landed the way it did. I have a call to the public. Mr. Norgard?
Thank you. First name, last name, Norgard, address 122 East Garfield Street in Tempe, Arizona 85281. Resident of the Papago Park area for 10 to 15 years, and have some major concerns. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to pass any material
Yeah,
to you.
you are. And you have 2 minutes.
Last summer,
And we're not allowed to comment on.
I know that.
Okay.
I know that. Thank you. Last summer, City of Phoenix decided to pave
I have these.
multiple sections of Papago Park. Hundreds of feet were paved. Used to look like this. For anyone that's interested, it now looks a lot more damaged with things like this. Hundreds of feet of poured concrete. I should highly point out that this trail is not ADA certified. It was never intended to be ADA certified. My concern is it sets a very dangerous precedent to the city of Phoenix and our parks, and the reason why we live here is because of our beautiful nature and our trails out there. There's been comments saying that if we pave it, it opens up to additional user groups. That's potential, right? What if we paved a path up the top of Camelback Mountain? Would that also increase activity on Camelback Mountain? I absolutely think so. In fact, what if we just had the I-10 go up over Camelback Mountain? When does this stop? And I want to point out, in the Papago Master Plan developed in 2010 amongst the city of Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale, and the Pima Indian community, if you look on page 51, it clearly states allow earthen trails only except for ADA accessible trails. Again, this is not an ADA accessible trail. Furthermore, if you go to page 13 of the Papago Master Plan, it clearly states in step number 11, eliminate unnecessary paving. Again, clear violation of the Papago Master Plan. If you go to page 36 of the Papago Master Plan, there was a workshop created, the top 10 categories of comment received from that workshop. Bullet point number 1 was natural desert preservation. And I continue. Additionally, the city of Phoenix closed Moreland Road to vehicular access and redeveloped this trail corridor into an ADA accessible multi-user trail. Hence, there's already a trail accessible for ADA compliance. Furthermore, early this week, Greg Bach, the public information officer of the city of Phoenix, made a public statement to ABC 15 News stating, and this was in regards to the Camelback Santa, and I quote, "We have an obligation to just maintain the public state, the natural state of the park." And that was in regards to Camelback Mountain. Can you say double standards much? Thank you.
So I would like Papago on June's agenda. My understanding is that the Parks Board, this goes in front of the Parks Board, and the Parks Board, as a decision has been made, but we can discuss that in the June agenda. Any other items for future agenda items?
You know, I had the privilege of flying with the police helicopter and all the rescues that during that hour and a half that I was on the helicopter for. It's just incredible, and all the resources that go behind it, from fire to police to even some of our park staff. I like to look at all that and creating some type of a policy or something that we as a city of Phoenix should have if people start to go off the trails and create their own trails. and that there's some type of fee or so if you go off a trail, and we have to provide all these services and all this support to rescue these individuals.
Okay. You want that for the June, or you want it for August?
I
I
think
don't
s-
know.
I think-
I think June's going to be tight, but we could put it for June.
Whenever it fits. yeah.
Okay, all right.
Could-
Councilman DeCiccio.
Could I add something too, for the June agenda that we're going to be looking at, whether it's Papago or not? I don't know if anything can be done with that, only because when the Parks Board's in charge of that area, but I think we can develop some sort of policy or a policy when it comes to paving and putting pavement into parks.
Okay.
I think people know where I'm at on this. It's just that I like the natural preservation as much as possible. I'm a hiker. It's just, I like being outdoors, and I understand the ADA part of it, and there are certain places that could be, but we ought to look at what that policy should be moving forward if this were ever to come up again. You know, I don't know how we're going to handle this one situation yet, but I do know that going forward, we can fix that.
Yeah.
So, Madam Chair,
And I
if
guess
we could put that as
in
part of
that,
that.
yeah, and in that, my thought in that process
Yeah.
is also, even though I don't know exactly I know some of the dynamics that happen, but even though it goes in front of the Parks Board, I think we have to have a policy on how paving or how they get neighborhood impact comments, everything like that we need to look at the policy, I guess is what I'm saying. All right, thank you for everybody. Meeting adjourned.